Hey friends, welcome back to the Irony Shelf. Tonight we continue our Volume 1 reading with O. Henry's After 20 Years and meet The Loyal Wanderer. After 2 decades in the great American West, a man has traveled 1,000 miles to keep a promise in a darkened doorway. But he may find that time can reshape life's priorities as much as it's changed the city he left behind. If you too have a soft spot for life's little ironies, do join our growing circle by liking and subscribing for more literary classics. We share new stories like this one every Thursday. Now, lean back, sip your dry Manhattan or something else as dry and sharp as O. Henry's wit, and enjoy our journey. New York City, 1906. The air is cool and damp, a gentle mixture of briny ocean mist and distant coal smoke from nearby rail yards that blankets the narrow streets. The city is quieting down as dusk begins to settle on what has been a wet and grey day, leaving the neighborhood draped in a tranquil silence. We're in the Old West Side, a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and dark brick tenements slowly being encroached upon by the industrial expansion of the docks. Between the warehouses and slaughterhouses nearby, some of the first luxury apartment buildings stand as lonely Gothic sentinels overlooking the darkening city. It is a neighborhood of shuttered shops and quiet alleys, barely illuminated by the soft, erratic glow of flickering gaslights, a far cry from the sharp, white-blue hum of new electric arc lamps taking over Broadway. In the doorway of a hardware store, wrapped in shadow, for the shop is already closed and shuttered, a tall, dark figure leans against the cold stone, holding a pocket watch with a steady hand. He watches the fog slowly drift around the street lamp at the corner, blurring the outlines of the nearby buildings into soft silhouettes. The faint, rhythmic clang of a distant buoy drifts in from the harbor, emphasizing the stillness of his wait. He stands motionless, observing the city with an intense, patient gaze that suggests he is waiting for something in the midst of the gloom of the darkening night. And here, dear listener, we begin our story. The policeman on the beat strolled up the avenue impressively. The impressiveness was habitual and not for show, for spectators were few. The time was barely 10 o'clock at night, but chilly gusts of wind with a taste of rain in them had nearly de-peopled the streets. Trying doors as he went, twirling his club with many intricate and artful movements, turning now and then to cast his watchful eye up and down the Pacific thoroughfare, the officer, with his solid form and slight swagger, was a fine picture of a guardian of the peace. The vicinity was one that kept mostly to the morning hours. Now and then you might see the lights of a cigar store or of an all-night lunch counter, but a majority of businesses had long since locked their doors. About halfway down a certain block, the policeman suddenly slowed his walk. In the doorway of a darkened hardware store, a man leaned, with an unlit cigar in his mouth. As the policeman walked up to him, the man spoke up quickly. "It's all right, officer," he said reassuringly. "I'm just waiting for a friend. It's an appointment made 20 years ago. Sounds a little funny to you, doesn't it? Well, I'll explain if you'd like to make certain it's all straight. 20 years ago, there used to be a restaurant where this store stands, Big Joe Brady's restaurant." "Until 5 years ago," said the policeman. "It was torn down." The man in the doorway struck a match and lit his cigar. The light showed a pale, square-jawed face with keen eyes, and a little white scar near his right eyebrow. His scarf pin had a large diamond, oddly set. 20 years ago tonight," said the man, "I dined here at Big Joe Brady's with Jimmy Wells, my best chum, and the finest chap in the world. He and I were raised here in New York, just like two brothers. I was 18, and Jimmy was 20. The next morning I was to start for the West to make my fortune. You couldn't have dragged Jimmy out of New York. He thought it was the only place on earth. Well, we agreed that night that we would meet here again exactly 20 years from that date and time, no matter what our conditions might be, or from what distance we might have to come. We figured that in 20 years, each of us ought to have our destiny worked out and our fortunes made, whatever they were going to be. "It sounds pretty interesting," said the policeman. "Rather a long time between meets, though, it seems to me. Haven't you heard from your friend since you left?" "Well, yes. For a time we corresponded," said the other. "But after a year or two we lost track of each other. You see, the West is a pretty big place, and I kept hustling around it pretty lively. But I know Jimmy will meet me here if he's alive, for he always was the truest, staunchest old chap in the world. He'll never forget. I came 1,000 miles to stand in this door tonight, and it's worth it if my old partner turns up." The waiting man pulled out a handsome watch, the lids of it set with small diamonds. 3 minutes to 10, he announced. It was exactly 10 o'clock when we parted here at the restaurant door. "Did pretty well out west, didn't you?" asked the policeman. "You bet. I hope Jimmy has done half as well. He was a kind of plodder, though, good fellow as he was. I've had to compete with some of the sharpest wits going to get my pile. A man gets in a groove in New York. It takes the West to put a razor edge on him." The policeman twirled his club and took a step or two. "I'll be on my way. Hope your friend comes around all right. Going to call time on him sharp?" "I should say not," said the other. "I'll give him half an hour at least. If Jimmy is alive on Earth, he'll be here by that time. So long, officer." "Good night, sir," said the policeman, passing on along his beat, trying doors as he went. There was now a fine cold drizzle falling, and the wind had risen from its uncertain puffs into a steady blow. The few people walking about in the area hurried dismally and silently along, with coat collars turned high and hands pocketed. And in the door of the hardware store, the man who had come 1,000 miles for an appointment, uncertain almost to absurdity with the friend of his youth, smoked his cigar and waited. About 20 minutes he waited. Then a tall man in a long overcoat, with collar turned up to his ears, hurried across from the opposite side of the street. He went directly to the waiting man. "Is that you, Bob?" he asked, doubtfully. "Is that you, Jimmy Wells?" nearly shouted the man in the door. "Bless my heart!" exclaimed the new arrival, grabbing both the other's hands with his own. "It's Bob, sure as fate. I was certain I'd find you here if you were still in existence. Well, well, well. 20 years is a long time. The old restaurant's gone, Bob. I wish it had lasted, so we could have had another dinner there. How has the West treated you, old man?" "Splendid. It has given me everything I asked it for. You've changed lots, Jimmy. I never thought you were so tall by 2 or 3 inches. "Oh, I grew a bit after I was 20. "Doing well in New York, Jimmy?" "Moderately. I have a position in one of the city departments. Come on, Bob. We'll go around to a place I know of and have a good long talk about old times." The two men started up the street, arm in arm. The man from the West, his ego enlarged by success, was beginning to outline the history of his career. The other, submerged in his overcoat, listened with interest. At the corner stood a drugstore, brilliantly lit with electric lights. When they came into this glare, each of them turned simultaneously to look upon the other's face. The man from the West stopped suddenly and released his arm. "You're not Jimmy Wells," he snapped. 20 years is a long time, but not long enough to change a man's nose from a Roman to a pug. It sometimes changes a good man into a bad one, said the tall man. You've been under arrest for 10 minutes, Silky Bob. Chicago thought you may have dropped over our way and wired us that she wants to have a chat with you. Going quietly, are you? That's sensible. Now, before we go on to the station, here's a note I was asked to hand you. You may read it here at the window. It's from Patrolman Wells. The man from the west unfolded the little piece of paper handed him. His hand was steady when he began to read, but it trembled a little by the time he had finished. The note was rather short. Bob, I was at the appointed place on time. When you struck the match to light your cigar, I saw it was the face of the man wanted in Chicago. Somehow I couldn't do it myself, so I went around and got a plainclothes officer to do the job. Jimmy. And here, dear listener, we conclude our reading of After 20 Years, written by O. Henry and respectfully adapted for the modern listener. The stories of William Sidney Porter, known to the world as O. Henry, were not merely conjured from fancy. Behind the mask of his famous pen name lay a complex man, a former bank teller turned convicted embezzler, who kept his past well hidden from the broader public. Yet, in the chaotic New York City streets at the turn of the century, Porter hit the ground running, reinventing himself and using his effortless sociability to strike up conversations with people in diners, in boarding houses, and on the streets, spending hours soaking in the cadence of their speech and the gritty details of their trades. In 1906, After 20 Years was published in the New York World as part of a series O. Henry titled The 4 Million, a collection that immortalized such classics as The Gift of the Magi and The Cop and the Anthem. The title was a masterful jab at the social arbiter Ward McAllister, seen here alongside the titans of high society, Caroline Schermerhorn Astor and Alva Vanderbilt Belmont. While McAllister famously claimed there were only 400 souls in New York worth knowing, Porter preferred crafting stories from the challenges and triumphs of the other 4 million, bringing the spotlight from the rich and famous to everyday New Yorkers. His stories involve flickering gaslight and the shadow of a metropolis in transition, where a chance encounter in a darkened doorway or a shared glance in a crowded diner serves as the catalyst for a life-altering reckoning. Thank you for listening. I look forward to sharing our next story with you very soon.